I am by forever neurologist infinitist. Neuroscience is by far the most exciting branch of science because the brain is the most fascinating object in the universe. Every human brain is different. The brain makes each human unique and defines who he or she is. Cognitive neuroscience is entering an exciting era in which new technologies and ideas are making it possible to study the neural basis of cognition, perception, memory, and emotion at the level of networks of interacting neurons, the level at which we believe many of the important operations of the brain take place. Neuroscience is a baby science, a mere century old, and our scientific understanding of the brain is nowhere near where we'd like it to be. We know more about the moons of Jupiter than what is inside of our skulls. Neuroscience over the next 50 years is going to introduce things that are mind blowing. Anyway, there is a lot of really interesting work going on in the neuroscience and psychology of consciousness, and I would love to see philosophers become more closely involved with this. My philosophy is really based on humility. I don't think we know enough to fix either diagnostics or therapeutics. The future of psychiatry is clinical neuroscience based on a much deeper understanding of the brain. My name is Matthew Walker. I am a professor of neuroscience and psychology at the University of California, Berkeley, and I am the author of the book Why We Sleep. Neuroscience has proven that similar areas of the brain are activated both in the person who suffers and in the one who feels empathy. Thus, empathic suffering is a true experience of suffering. I am trained as a psychologist, and I think of all human issues in terms of psychology, neuroscience, genetics, and evolutionary theory. I've always been fascinated with knowing the self. This fascination led me to submerge myself in art, study neuroscience, and later to become a psychotherapist. Moore's law based technology is so much easier than neuroscience. The brain works in such a different way from the way a computer does. Neuroscience is exciting, understanding how thoughts work, how connections are made, how the memory works, how we process information, how information is stored. It's all fascinating. There's a lot of neuroscience now raising the question, is all the intelligence in the human body in the brain? And they're finding out that no, it's not like that. The body has intelligence itself, and we're much more of an organic creature in that way. From my studies of genetics and neuroscience, I have come to believe that people fall into four broad personality type, each influenced by a different brain chemical. I call them the explorer, the builder, director, and negotiator. Within psychology, neuroscience, some new and rigorous experimental paradigms for studying consciousness have helped to begin to overcome the stigma that has been attached to the topic for most of this century. I think neuroscience is obviously very esoteric, but I think there are aspects of it that can absolutely be brought down to the level of an interested 11, 12, or 13-year-old easily. Well, my parents originally wanted me to become a doctor. That's why I was in school, was pre-med, and I graduated with a degree in psychology and concentration and neuroscience. Really, the plan was for me to go to med school, drool. When it comes to how neuroscience could help the wider public, the worst thing when we make advances in, say, mindfulness, and then decide that everybody can potentially think their way to curing themselves or developing their own psychoneural immune mechanisms for boosting cancer defenses. Actually, I think my view is compatible with much of the work going on now in neuroscience and psychology, and where people are studying the relationship of consciousness to neural and cognitive processes without really trying to reduce it to those processes. It could be, and it has been argued, in my view, rather plausibly, though neuroscientists don't like it, but that neuroscience for the last couple hundred years has been on the wrong track. There's an old rule in neuroscience that does not alter with age, use it or lose it. It is a very hopeful principle when applied to critical thought and the reading brain because it implies choice. I studied neuroscience at the cellular level, so I was looking at learning the memory and the visual cortex of rats. Neuroscience mainly exposed me to a way of thinking about experimentation, about what you believe to be true and how you could prove it, and how to approach things in a methodical manner. The kind of neuroscience that I do and my colleagues do is almost like the weathermen. We are always chasing storms. We want to see and measure storms, brainstorms, that is, for moral judgment. I think the most interesting trends in neuroscience are the ways in which judgments vary as a function of how emotionally salient the situation is. Genetics is crude, but neuroscience goes directly to work on the brain, and the mind follows when it comes to exploring the mind in the framework of cognitive neuroscience. The maximal yield of data comes from integrating what a person experiences the first person with the measurements show the third person. I don't doubt that the explanation for consciousness will arise from the mercilessly scientific account of psychology and neuroscience, but still, isn't it neat that the universe is such that it gave rise to conscious beings like you and me? I have a neuroscience background. That's what my doctrine is in. I am a doctrine in Ryman, and I was so trained to study hormones of attachment, so I definitely feel my parenting is informed by that. In school, I study psychology, linguistics, neuroscience. I understand that there is a real lack of respect for the brain. Why is it surprising that scientists might have long hair and wear cowboy boots in fields like neuroscience, where the events you are recording are so minute? I suspect scientists cultivate a born, reliable image. Scientists with a reputation for flamboyance might be suspect. Rap-bapa.